This is Rob Tebbutt for Boxing Social in association with Betfred. Delighted, as always, to be joined by Ben Davison. How are you, Ben?
I'm good, thanks, mate. You?
I'm very well, thanks. Very well. Nice to catch up with you. Been a little while. How have you been?
I've been good. Yourself?
Not bad. Always good, Ben. You know me.
You look like you chopped a little bit of timber.
No, I've actually had my beard trimmed. So it just looks a little bit slimmer.
Just to make it look that way.
Yes, but thank you very much. Always a good start to the interview when people throw a compliment my way. So thanks very much, Ben. Let's talk about some boxing. This past weekend, we saw shows on this side of the Atlantic and the other. Let's start on Friday with somebody you know very, very well. Billy Joe Saunders returns to the ring. The clear, kind of wide decision win over Martin Murray. You know Billy very well. What did you make of his performance?
I think that Billy Joe was very honest in himself, and it's good because he clearly sets a standard for himself. It was a little bit of a flattish performance, but it was definitely something to build on. There was elements in it where you could see he started to find his groove, but it's no shock that we know that Billy Joe sort of raises to what's in front of him. I know people were saying, mixed. Some people were saying it was a really nice performance. Some people were saying it was a little bit of ring rust, etc. But I like the fact that Billy Joe was honest with himself and wasn't over the moon with it, because it wasn't a performance that was, one for the memory books, but it was one that was done his job. It was one to shake some ring rust off. He made no bones about the fact that he had to drop a lot of weight. And it was a nice 12 rounds to get into the bank. But I'd also think that Martin Murray was very, very smart in there. He's very good at playing with distance, sort of rushing in distance to draw the lead out of Billy Joe, then pulling back out, taking his feet back out, making Billy Joe fall short a few times. So, Martin Murray, was smart in his approach. And as you said, it was a nice 12-round victory that Billy Joe shook off some ring rust and sets him up to start building momentum.
You mentioned him shaking off the ring rust. Obviously, this year's not been ideal for anybody, let alone fighters, for a variety of reasons. Now he's got those 12 rounds under his belt. How important is that moving into next year? And how important is it that he stays in the gym now and he doesn't allow himself? It feels like we talk about this after pretty much every Billy Joe Saunders fight.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it is. Listen, it's one of them, and it is something that we always say, and it's the truth. Like, Billy Joe is so gifted as a fighter. It's ridiculous. That's the God's honest truth. And I've worked with some top quality fighters, so I think I'm quite qualified to say that. I seriously rate Canelo. Seriously rate Canelo. But hand on my heart, I do believe that, the right tactics, the right game plan, the right preparation and everything right, Billy Joe can certainly win that fight, and in good fashion, I believe, as well. So, he does need momentum. He does need to keep it up. He does need to make his next 2 years of his life just solely focused on boxing. It's a hard thing to do. It's no easy feat, especially when you've already put so much of your life into it. But just another few years of just tightening the screws and that little bit of extra laser-like focus and just making it a lifestyle for just the next few years. And, there's no one in the middleweight division to touch him. And I believe that he'll take over the super middleweight division as well. So it depends what fights come option, what happens. Obviously, there's a big fight in his division later on in the year, or in a couple of weeks. So that'll be an interesting one. And just hope that he gets the right opportunities and sticks at it,
You mentioned the big fight coming at the end of the year. We'll talk about that in a second. Canelo versus Callum Smith. 2 fights that at various different times have been heavily linked for Billy Joe. He's not going to get either of those. Well, potentially not going to get them next. He might do. If it's not either of those, who would you like to see him in with next?
Truth? Anybody. Just keep the momentum going. Keep him training. Keep him in shape. Keep the ring rust off, and keep active. That's the most important thing. So
Does he need somebody though? I mean, I get what you're saying. Keep active, keep in the gym, but he is now at the stage where he needs really those marquee fights. You mentioned the fact that he's only got a couple of years left potentially in the sport. He's kind of done the hard yards throughout his career. He's got some good wins on the way up. He's now in the position to get those big fights. What about a Gennady Golovkin, a Demetrius Andrade, somebody like that?
That's perfectly ideal, isn't it? You know, whether we get them, we don't know. So we just have to wait and see. But like I say, you know, the problem is, like, we always call him those fights for those fights and for Billy Joe. But I think the main thing is that now clearly it's not working. So a different approach would be just, let's just fight someone, you know, and keep that active. And then hopefully, you know, something happens and there's an availability in May and Billy Joe can finally get that opportunity.
Before we move on, obviously you've worked with Billy Joe, you've worked with Tyson, you've worked with these kind of, you know, maverick style fighters. What is it about, you know, a Billy Joe Saunders or a Tyson Fury that makes them kind of rise or fall to the level of their opponent? And essentially, how is that psyche of dealing with that fighter different to dealing with a regular fighter, so to speak?
I think it's just that, funny enough, I've been in the gym with Prince Nazim today and had the same conversation. He was like, in which fight was it? I forget the name of the opponent, but he got dropped, and he was like, it was a wake up call. It put a bit of fear in me. Yes, because he, you know, it gave him that extra bit of focus to go, oh, I need to switch on here. And I think guys like Tyson, guys like Billy Joe, you need that little bit of fear to make sure that your game's razor sharp, because they've boxed for so long, you know. Tyson's changed now, where it's now he's made it, you know, since his comeback, his lifestyle to be a fighter and a boxer, whereas before he was sort of trained for a fight, then not do anything, and then train for a fight. And that's sort of where Billy Joe's at. But if Billy Joe can make it his lifestyle, like Canelo doesn't spend a day out of the gym. He didn't know he's boxing this year, but he spent all year in the gym. If you can make it your lifestyle and you're always ready to go, then that little bit of fine tuning is ready. But for Billy Joe, I think often it's a case of, I'll do a bit of training here, a bit of training there, and wants to, which you got to respect as well. And it's a massive, great thing that he's got, where he keeps himself grounded. You know, likes to be one of the lads and just live a normal life to a certain degree. But you know, if he can just do that whilst keeping in the gym and keeping busy and not being that far off, being ready to go, and just forever working on your craft, because you can never stop learning and never stop improving, then I think he'll find it easier to get more activity and fight regularly. Might be able to get an option to get one of these big fights when availability comes, and just be an all-round better fighter. But also, probably when he's boxing at, as you put, regular, you'd want to put it, but regular opponent, you know, you haven't got to go, okay, I've got to focus so much on making weight. I can just focus on my craft and doing what I need to do when I get in there, and the actual performing.
Now, when dealing with like those maverick talents, people who are so naturally gifted, like a Tyson Fury or a Billy Joe Saunders, the flip side of that is, does it make things more frustrating at times for you as a trainer, dealing with somebody like a Billy Joe who you know is so gifted, but by his own admission doesn't always live the life?
Does it make you more frustrated? It can do. Yeah, of course it can be frustrating, but like,
or more challenging, I think maybe is the right word.
I mean, does it make it more challenging for the trainer? Yeah, but of course it makes it more challenging for himself as well. But I know, like, people always are. They're naturally talented guys, and of course they are super talented, but hungry to learn as well. Do you know what I mean? Don't think that they're not. What should I do there? What did you think of this? Or they want to, you know, they still want to learn, and that's the key thing. They still want to improve. That's the key thing. But obviously, it just makes that side of it harder when you've got to focus on losing a certain amount of weight and making sure they make the weight. And that's a big stress for fighters that go up and come down in weight. And it, of course, it can affect performance. So, yeah, I just think obviously it does make it difficult, but it'd be nice for him to stay in the gym. It's nothing that he don't know. Do you know what I mean? Been in boxing his whole life, so he knows what he needs to do. It's just a case of doing it. And I think, I think that if he's enjoying his training, which is important, and often that's why he's chopped up and down the trainers, and Tyson's done the same back and forth and all over the place, so that it just keeps it fresh. And because Billy Joe hasn't really made it a lifestyle. So he likes different techniques, different styles of training, mixing it up, different locations, and just keeps it fresh for him. And I think that's what he tries to do, and that's why he's always bit all over the place.
Moving on, last night over here we saw Frank Warren's card return, Anthony Yarde versus Lyndon Arthur. Before we talk about the main event, somebody else on that undercard that you know very well, you've had in the gym a lot recently, Dennis Mccann, continued his unbeaten start to the paid ranks with a decision win over Pedro Matos. What did you make of his performance?
I haven't sat down and watched it. I mean, I've seen a couple of highlights. I just think for Dennis, he's at a point obviously he's young. He's got some, it's all about progression and development. He's a very, very talented lad. I think his career is definitely one to watch. I just think there's the right fights at the right time. Certain questions need to be asked along the way. And you need certain fights to do that along the way. I think, someone like a Thomas Asomba, someone along those sort of lines to ask certain questions that Dennis will come through the fight, but there's going to be questions asked. But it's difficult. I'll tell you why it's difficult. It's difficult because there's pressure on him to perform, because he's got that. He's got people are talking about him. So the moment he has a performance where questions are asked along the way, it's almost like, oh, I don't know now. No, that's not the case. Questions get asked along a performance. That's what you need. So you can clearly see, okay, this is what we need to work on. That's what we need to work on. This is how he handles a situation like this. This is how he handles a situation like that. But maybe we need to focus development in this area, in that area. You're not going to find those things out if you're constantly having it all your own way. So I think there's pressure on him there, which makes it difficult. But like I said, I think that his career is certainly one to watch. He needs the right fights at the right time, and certain fights to ask certain questions so that you can see more of where he's at and what he needs. But I think at the moment, the opposition isn't the right opposition to ask those questions of him at the moment.
What type of character is he in the gym, Ben? Obviously, you've had him down to spar with Shabazz Massoud, Lee McGregor. What's he like?
Yeah, he didn't spar with Shabazz and Lee McGregor. He sparred with a couple of other lads in my gym. He's a hungry lad that wants to improve, wants to gain information, wants to, he wants to be the best, and he believes in himself. And I just think that's what he needs. He needs a fight where he may lose a round. He may start getting a little bit, maybe an 8-rounder or a 10-rounder where, he's going to take over the first 6, but the last few questions might be asked and see where he's at. He's got to learn how to be economical, how to do the rounds. You learn from your mistakes. So he needs to be put in there with people who are going to draw mistakes out of him, make him make mistakes. But, of course, you want him where he's able to do so and winning along the way. So, but like I say, I certainly think he's one to watch. His career is one to watch for sure. What I'm saying is not negative. Do you know what I mean? I'm just saying what I'm trying to say is I think as fans, they need to be able to allow that he needs to be able to be given that, because there's a lot of talk about him. There's a lot of pressure, and it's almost like if we match him where these questions do get asked, then all of a sudden there's that little bit of, what's the word I'm looking for? Hype. Yeah. That little bit of hype around him made people start questioning, but it doesn't mean it needs questioning. Everybody has to have those fights along the way where questions get asked so that they're able to improve, and it's all an important part of the development. And that's what I want. What I'm trying to say is that's what I want the fans to allow Dennis to have. Don't expect him just to be able to blow everybody away and all this kind of thing, you know, allow him the time to develop, to be able to get to where people want to see him or expect him to go.
Yeah, it's about managing expectation, which kind of, and what you've said there kind of leads me in nicely to the main event yesterday, Anthony Yarde versus Lyndon Arthur. Going into the fight, I think a lot of people, it's safe to say, had the fight, a closer fight on paper, certainly than the bookies had. Lyndon Arthur pulls out the upset split decision win. What did you make of his performance?
Lyndon Arthur's performance, yeah, I thought it was a really good performance. I thought that he boxed intelligent. Everybody kept talking about the jab of Lyndon Arthur. My only worry was if it was a predictable jab where, you know, it was readable, it could end up being used against him by Anthony Yarde. But he was very clever in the way that he threw the rhythm off, adjusted the timing, the feints in between the work that prevented Yarde from countering. And I thought it was a good performance. I actually done the punditry on the weigh-in yesterday, and I mentioned that I think it's the right fight at the right time for Lyndon Arthur, because it was a case of questions had been asked of him before, where he then had to go back to the drawing board, come through the fights, but questions were asked where it was a case of, okay, this is what I need to work on, that's what I need to work on. And it was able for him and his team to see where the development needed to be focused on. And I said, and the same thing that I did there, I feel like it was maybe a fight or two too late for Yarde in terms of his preparation for the Kovalev fight. So, yeah.
You mentioned the Sergey Kovalev fight. Now, obviously, we saw what happened in that fight. We saw how close Anthony Yarde come to getting the stoppage, but we also saw him struggle to deal with the lead hand of Kovalev and how Kovalev controlled the distance against him. We saw those same issues last night against Lyndon Arthur. Would you agree?
Yeah, because it was done in the same way, and that's something that actually is a point that'll be made again in the Smith and Canelo fight, where what Kovalev did and does is varies that lead hand up. The jab's not predictable. It's always varied. And Lyndon Arthur, I don't know if he watched the Kovalev Yarde fight, but he took that into his game last night and made it work for him. And it was a key part of that fight and a key part of making it difficult for Yarde to be able to read that jab.
Anthony Yarde since come out and claimed or called robbery. Feels like he was robbed in the fight. Felt like he won the fight. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there was moments. Obviously, I watched it over here, so it was very early. So there was moments I didn't get to see the every minute of every second of the fight. So I can't sit there and score it really. But I mean, why not? Good fight. It's a good matchup. I'm sure they can do it again.
A lot of the talk as well is centering around Tunde Ajayi. Obviously came in for significant criticism after the Sergey Kovalev fight. That since has carried over into this fight. You've been in the position where, you know, you've been criticised as a trainer. You've had fans say, oh, he needs to get rid of Ben Davison and what have you. What are your thoughts around that? We've now seen Anthony Yarde come up short twice, essentially to a very, very similar style or a very similar game plan that he's had to face, and he's not made the adjustments. Is it fair? Is it unfair for people to be suggesting or for him to look in at potential changes within his team?
I've not seen what was said in the corner, what adjustments were attempted to be made. I haven't seen that. In terms of the fans, you know, criticising Tunde, like you said, listen, my fighter won, and I'll get criticised. Do you know what I mean? I was criticised, so you know that's going to happen without people knowing what's going on in the background, what the situation is, anything like that. So you know, it comes, it goes. If the fight before, actually, my fighter blew someone away, and then all of a sudden the fight after, it's their fault that the performance wasn't fantastic and still getting a win. But you know, that's the way it goes. If you're focusing on that, only Tunde and Yarde will know what areas they was working on, whether they missed something, that kind of thing. But I think that Tunde's done a good job with Yarde. Like I say, it's not. I can't comment and say, yeah, they've not worked on this. How do I know? I've not been in the gym with them. I can't say what they did or didn't do. I didn't hear what was said in the corner in between rounds. I don't know. You know, it's not really for me to say where their relationship's at. I just think, you know, in terms of Yarde doing that same show, the weighing show I mentioned about him, he pressing too hard from the left and allowing his fighter to keep going back to the centre, almost following his fighter. I understand, you know, he may be doing that for a certain reason, but there's a time and a place to then step across, reset, and keep your opponent in certain areas of the ring. But you know, and that ended up being a key factor in that fight, I feel, because he pressed so hard from the left, it gave Arthur an opportunity not only just to walk back to the centre, but any fighter know that jabbing moving to your left as an orthodox is a lot easier than being forced to jab moving to your right. That's without mentioning the mental pressure that's put on when you're keeping an opponent pinned to the ropes and on the back foot and not giving them much space. So, you know, I do feel that played a factor last night. But listen, it was an interesting fight. Like I say, only Tunde and Yarde know if they would have missed something or whatnot. But it's difficult, isn't it? Because I feel like those are the type of fights that Yarde probably has needed a little bit earlier. But again, we don't know where Lyndon Arthur is in time to come. That may prove to be I'm saying it's a loss. It's, you know, some people think it was a 50-50 fight. I don't know. But Lyndon may go on to have a couple of fantastic wins off the bat here. And then all of a sudden, you know, the perspective on the fight completely changes. So it's hard to say right now. I think the best thing would be is to get the fighters back in there for a rematch.
Okay, before I move on, I don't know if you'd have watched the fight last night between Chris Bourke and Michael Rama-Beleza. Obviously, has some implications for Mr. Maverick, Shabazz Massoud. Impressive performance from Chris Bourke. Yeah,
it was. You know, I thought it could have been a tricky fight. I've only seen the stoppage. I didn't see the first round. But Shabazz has actually been sparring quite a bit with Chris Bourke, and obviously he was in line to fight against Rama-Beleza. Yeah, you know, that's a fantastic win. He's only been stopped, 2 or 3 times. Rama-Beleza boxed some of the best. Once, is it? Stopped some of the top fighters coming through. Boxed some of the top fighters coming through. And so I've only been stopped once or twice is some feat. So he's obviously a tough man, and Bourke got a fantastic win there. He's a nice lad. I think he's an intelligent fighter as well. Obviously, my man's up for the job, Shabazz. You know, like I say, Shabazz was supposed to be boxing Rama-Beleza for the English title, but it didn't come off for whatever reason. And, you know, it was impressive. But that super bantamweight division's a good little division there. So, yeah, my man Shabazz, like I say, is ready for him. Whoever wants it. He wants all the smoke.
He certainly does. I can only speak from the last time I saw him. And I remember him. I think I'd turned up on the day and I'd had a DM from Michael Rama-Beleza. I think I'd posted that I was coming to the gym. And he's like, tell Shabazz Massoud. And Shabazz was going, message him back this. Tell him this. I'm going to fight him this. So I can vouch for that. He's very much keen and ready for all comers.
Yeah, Shabazz wants them fights. And listen, God's honest truth, I've got extremely high expectations for Shabazz. He's a really, really, really talented kid. He just needs to be given the opportunity to be able to. He hasn't boxed for a year, so he needs to be given the opportunity. Obviously, he's parted ways with Frank Warren. So, you know, it's hopefully we get him a busy 2021 and hopefully some titles are involved in that 2021.
Okay, final action of this weekend. Errol Spence made a triumphant return to the ring against Danny Garcia. A clear, convincing decision win. What did you make of the fight, Ben?
I thought it was a good fight. I thought there was good moments back and forth in the fight. Danny Garcia is obviously a very, very tough man. I thought it was a solid enough performance from Spence, to be honest, after the accident and whatnot. I thought that he was clever. I think the difference between the two was the in-between work. A fight's often got a rhythm of... If it was a vocal thing, it would be... Boom, 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 boom. You ready? You ready? Yeah. Well, in that moment of are you ready and that reset yourself, Spence was jabbing, Spence was probing, Spence was being active. Even if they wasn't jabs, they was occupying Danny, keeping him busy, keeping him mentally working, and then that set up the rest of the work for Spence, allowed him to go into his next phase of attack with a smooth, plain, nice, easy entry. So I felt like that was the difference. The punch stats were quite interesting. But, yeah, good fight to watch as well. Like I say, there were some moments from Danny Garcia there where I was impressed with his intelligence. I could see what he was trying to do. You know, land on one target, and then aim for another target. But Spence was onto it, kept his shape well, and boxed well. I was impressed.
I think a certain Terence Crawford was in attendance last night. Now Errol Spence has made a return to the ring. He looks healthy. Back, still unbeaten. That's got to be the fight next, surely. That's the fight that we all want to see next.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we know that both parties are willing to work with each other because we've seen it with Tyson and Wilder. So I don't see why that fight couldn't happen if every party wants it. When I say every party, I don't just mean the fighters, I mean the people in the business side of it behind it. So, listen, it's one that I want to see, that's for sure. It's got to happen. It's got to happen now. It's got to happen now because it'll end up being excuses. Both men are on fire. Great win from both in recent last couple of weeks. So, yeah, I really want to see it.
If not, Errol Spence is talking about going up to middleweight and boxing Canelo.
Step too far, in my opinion.
Yeah? Why is that?
I just think, firstly, Spence is very, very good. His physical dominance is a huge factor in the welterweight division, but he's slightly one-paced if I was to be critical of him. And I just think to be one-paced against Canelo is you're asking for trouble. As good as he is, like I said, I think a big part of his game is his physical domination of the others at welterweight, and he's obviously not going to have that asset going into the middleweight division against Canelo.
Before we move on, we touched upon it earlier on in the interview, Canelo Alvarez versus Callum Smith. We are only a couple of weeks away. I know you well enough to know that you'll be backing your man, the Brit. You'll be backing the Brit in the fight. Obviously would be a huge win, not only for Callum Smith, but for British boxing. Do you give him much chance of pulling off the upset?
Difficult one, Rob. Obviously, I want Callum to win. Listen, I'm a massive fan of Canelo. Do you know what I mean? Massive fan of him. I like all of the Smith brothers. All of them. Really nice guys. I really get on with Joe Gallagher as well. I think he's a really, really nice guy. And I think he's a fantastic coach. Brilliant coach. I really, really do. And I mean that. I just think stylistically... Listen, everybody's got to be entitled to their opinion, haven't they? And if I just come on here to say what, because I like Joe and because I like the Smith brothers, and if I just said what people wanted me to say to them, what I'm saying means fuck all, really, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean? Just saying things to keep people happy. I just think stylistically. So I don't mean anything like against anybody by this. Like I said, I've made it very, very clear. I think Callum's a phenomenal fighter. Phenomenal fight. I think it's a hard fight for Billy Joe. I think Billy Joe's a hard fight for him. So it's nothing against anybody here. I just think, my opinion, it's just stylistically a fight that Canelo Alvarez will like. But of course, Callum's versatile. He's a top quality fighter. People keep going to me, oh yeah, but look at the John. Be realistic. Billy Joe's had performances, like we said, where people have gone, off of that last performance. Doesn't mean he's going to perform like that next time he gets in the ring. Rising to the occasion. Was he really up for the Ryder fight? It's not taking nothing away from John Ryder because I like John Ryder. But I'm not going off of that. I believe that Callum will raise his game. I just think that stylistically it's a fight that Canelo will like. It's a difficult one, isn't it? He may be able to, but I don't know if Callum is able to box in a way that I feel that you would need to box to be able to deal with Canelo. But he may be able to, and I hope that he is able to, of course.
What style is that then?
Well, just for somebody like him, right. So the typical thing is, yeah, he's tall. Callum, obviously. Canelo is short. What are people going to say that he needs to do? Keep him at the end of the jab? Well, the more jabs you throw at Canelo, the more opportunities you're going to give him to counter. I think the style that he will need to take into that fight would be something similar to what Kovalev did. Now, don't get me wrong. I think Callum's better up close than Kovalev. But I don't imagine Callum's just going to say, okay, let's go straight to mid to short range. There's going to be moments that he's going to have at long range. And is he able to be that versatile with his lead hand to nullify Canelo at that distance and not to give him opportunities to counter the jab? I don't know. But he may be able to. Do you know what I mean? He may be able to. And he's very, very good mid to short range. But of course, we know that Canelo is very, very good mid to short range. We know that Callum's a big puncher. We know that Canelo's a big puncher. So he definitely, of course, he's got a chance. Of course, he's got a chance. But what I'm saying is, obviously, I'd have to say that I favour Canelo in that fight. I think that he's probably, if you're going to say to me, who's your money on, it would be on Canelo. But it doesn't mean that I don't think that Callum's got a chance. Of course he's got a chance. I just think that, I haven't seen him box in the way that I feel that he'll need to box in this. But as I've said, I'm repeating myself now. He may be able to. It doesn't mean that he's not able to do so.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. I don't think Joe Gallagher will be ringing you up, abusing you after that. I think you'll be all right.
No, I like Joe. I really get on with Joe. I think he's a fantastic trainer. I know that obviously sometimes certain people like to give him a bit of stick, but, he's won world titles with fighters that not many trainers would have been able to win world titles with. So that says it all, to be honest. Enough said.
Enough said, indeed.
It is though.
No.
And he messages me. He's a nice guy. We always check up on each other. How you doing? Catch up. Nice. He's a really nice man. And like I say, the Smith brothers are really nice guys as well. Get on with them. So,
just to echo that, we're all big fans of Big Joe on Boxing Social as well. He's always having Andy in the gym. So if you're watching, Joe, thanks very much. Before I let you go, Ben, next weekend, or this weekend now, because it's Sunday, sees the return of Anthony Joshua against Aj-Pulev, mandatory defense of his IBF World Heavyweight title. Seems like a good stylistic matchup for Anthony Joshua on the back of the Ruiz fight last year. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so. It's going to be interesting to see what style he goes into this fight. Obviously, we know that he showed some versatility, which I was very impressed with in the second Ruiz fight, because I always felt like too one-dimensional. Joshua, very, very good at what he does, but too one-dimensional. At the top level, can't be one-dimensional. And he went away, worked on his craft and showed some versatility. And straight away, he went boom, in my estimations, with that. So I'm now intrigued to say, does he come with that same approach? It's a bit like Tyson in the second Wilder fight. For me, it was a case of right tactic at the right time. Would I employ that tactic from now on for Tyson all the time? Time and a place, moments in fight, versatile, fantastic. But I wouldn't completely go away from what he was known for as well. And what he had the success leading up to that with. So it'd be interesting to see, to be honest with you, it'd be interesting to see what both men how both men approached their next fight in the first few rounds. And I'm interested to see how Joshua approaches his next fight, obviously with Pulev around the corner, and what tactics he employs. I think the best thing for both of them is to be able to flow between the different styles and flow between different tactics, different looks, different approaches throughout a fight. And that's really, what the top fighters are able to do. And the first few rounds will be extremely interesting if we get to see Tyson and Joshua, because how each man approaches the fight and the adjustments that I feel will need to be made in the first couple of rounds, I think will be, I think it'll be a real fantastic technical and tactical spectacle. So, yeah, all the best to Anthony Joshua. And I think he'll put on a good performance and I think he'll get a solid enough victory and look good doing so.
Just final one on that. I mean, you make a good point about, that both Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua they've not swapped styles, but Tyson Fury went from, being known as a back foot boxer to being this front, essentially a seek and destroy fighter against Deontay Wilder, and sort of the roles were reversed for Anthony Joshua from Ruiz 1 to Ruiz 2. That being said, I'm assuming I know you well enough to know that you will say that everything requires a blend of both styles, but what style would you think is best for Anthony Joshua to employ against Pulev? Obviously, Pulev, stand-up-ish, he's, European style, very different style to, the fighters who have conventionally caused Joshua the issues in the past, Andy Ruiz, even back to Mihai Nistor and the amateurs, those short, stocky fighters who come forward. Pulev isn't that type of fighter, though.
No, he's not. I think that what it'll be for Joshua, I think it'll be an element of a little bit more agility than what we'd seen previous to the second Ruiz fight, but also doesn't want to give Pulev momentum, time. When I say momentum, I mean allowing him to look like he's pressing the fight and Joshua just to go on the back foot for the sake of looking pretty. So I think it'll be a case of probably a little bit more bounce in his step, a little bit more agility, a little bit more flow to his work than what we would have seen previous. But not completely the sort of punching on the move type style that we sort of saw against Ruiz. I mean, there was moments where he sort of set things up, almost held his feet in the Ruiz fight with a little bit of flow and bounce to his feet with some lead hand work, bit of disguise, bump, drop the right hand. I think that's the sort of thing that we'll see against Pulev when they fight.
Okay, well, we look forward to seeing it. Ben Davison, always a real pleasure catching up with you. Thanks very much for speaking to Boxing Social. If I don't speak to you before, have a good Christmas, but I do hope that I do. Thanks as always, and I'll catch up with you soon.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Ben.